Welcome to the Rich and Purpose Transform Childhood Trauma Summit. Today I'm here with Gary Lougher, a trauma coach known for helping people break long-term standing patterns through a nervous system regulation, embodied healing, and practical tools for daily resilience. Gary, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Well, thank you. Gary, before I start asking the questions, why don't you tell us a little bit about what made you become a trauma coach and how you came about that?
Um, it's funny. A friend of mine had a friend who wanted to know about certifications in trauma recovery, and I didn't know of any, and I had never really heard of trauma recovery coaching, so I started researching it, and I came across the trauma recovery coaching from the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaches, and it looked really interesting. And I remember reading some things on their website and thinking about how well it not only described the way I was feeling, but for the first time in my life, I felt like it was okay to admit that I had experienced trauma. It was something that I had shied away from because I didn't really understand it. I guess I was probably wrapped up in the stigma of it, and I thought that if I admitted to myself and other people that I had experienced trauma, that I would be saying I had a bad childhood or my parents abused me and all those things. And so I realized that none of that was true, and I got into it and I just signed up. I think it was within a day. I said, "Oh, I'm going to do this." I'd been in the coaching profession in organizations. I was a manager and a coach, and I started to see just all these possibilities for how someone could help with a trauma recovery certification, and even in the workplace, because a lot of times when you're dealing with conflict, you're dealing with people who are having um, trauma responses. It's very helpful. So and that I graduated from that in last September. So I've been a trauma recovery coach now for a little over a year.
Well, the one thing that you mentioned that many times we go, especially for people who've had childhood trauma, we don't realize we have it or that we did experience it.
Yes.
So, it's great that you have a little bit with yourself that okay, I had something, but to get out and start helping people with it, and you talk about being a manager and a leader. So much of it, I believe, since about 80% of the people who have experienced childhood trauma or some kind of trauma, you don't realize that you are dealing with some of the built-in patterns that they have.
Yeah.
So, it's good that
I
you already noticed that.
and I identified in myself that my biggest trauma response, or the most dominant, I guess, was perfectionism. And I guess for lack of better words, I attacked that perfectionism piece, and I went and got a little therapy. And I'll tell you, the biggest thing I learned was that perfectionism tendency is probably never going to all go away. Um, at least not all the way away. But when we learn to manage it, and when we learn to be okay with it and have self-compassion for ourselves, because we can see that, oh, I'm not lazy, I'm not a procrastinator, I'm not um, I'm not stupid. There's a reason why I can't focus, and a lot of that's related to perfectionism. It really the whole self-compassion piece regulates the nervous system a little bit, because we don't have to beat ourselves up over it anymore. We can recognize it, we can see when it's in play, and we can walk ourselves through an internal process where we say, okay, what's going on here?
Well, the one thing that I noticed with a lot of the responses there in my interviews with coaches and speakers is that awareness, right? Until you become aware of it, you can't solve it. So that's been something that, and self compassion. Those two things probably have been the number one responses that I've had from speakers and coaches.
Viktor Frankl talks about the power of the pause, that space between stimulus and response. And that's where the magic is.
Right.
That's what I found for myself and most of my clients. If we can learn to be in that pause and be okay with not having to say the first thing that comes to our mind, or to think, or to latch on to the first thought that comes, we can ask ourselves, what's going on here? And what am I going to do with in this situation that I'm in right now? Whether it's an internal conversation or a pause between wanting to do something or wanting to do something and not doing it, or a conversation like you're having with the person in front of you.
Yeah.
It's powerful, very, very powerful.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, awareness and being and knowing what you to do, and then learning, right? You became a trauma coach, so you learned a lot about how to respond and how to help other people respond
Yeah,
to what's happening. The
yeah.
first question I want to ask you, Gary, is when you use the phrase rebellion reimagined, what are you inviting people who grew up in chaos or pressure to consider or reclaim?
Well, can I talk a little bit about the origin of that first? Would that
Sure.
be all right? I was thinking about, when we talk about having a relationship with the inner child, with our inner child. And I started to think about what I was like as a child, and most of my friends were like as children, and we were very rebellious. And it's interesting that a lot of the trauma, a lot of the trauma that we experience is a direct response to our rebellion as children, our rebellion against um, rules that we don't want to follow, or being shoehorned into a mold, or you know and I thought it was interesting, and so I'm like, I want to be that kid again. I want my rebellion back. That's what I want, right?
Right.
And I started to have fun with it, right? Because sometimes in this work, and it is very serious work, and it's not my intention to downplay it, but sometimes there's room for a little lightness, right? And the way we can look at things sometimes helps make it light. So I went with it, and I just started playing with words, and I'm like, rebellion reimagined. And the thing about the reimagining is, it's like, okay, so what type of rebel does the world need today? And it's not the loud rebel, it's not the fighting, it's that peaceful, quiet rebellion. And really, what I'm inviting people to rebel against is our disinheritance. Now, in my book, Rewilding Your Soul, I called disinheritance the cumulative effects, or the interwoven effects, of our toxic culture that we live in, um, the political divide, the infighting, what's wrong with our food supply, the fact that there's uh, we don't move enough, we don't have systems in place that are human centered. I don't believe our institutions are failing us. So there's that, and that causes um, that can at least exacerbate trauma responses. There's evolutionary mismatch, which is that mismatch between who we were born to be and where we've evolved to where the culture has evolved. And we're literally, and I mean literally in the strictest sense, not built for this world. We are not meant to handle this many relationships, this many notifications. Our sleep cycles are all jacked up because of artificial lighting. Our food is unnatural. We don't move enough. It's just not what we're built for. And then there's the generational and the developmental trauma that we've all experienced. And those three things are at the core. Every human being on this planet is subject to that on some level. And then when you throw in the fact that we have a language, an internal language, our inner voice that beats us up constantly because we can't seem to get along in this world and we can't seem to be at ease in this world. We are so hard on ourselves. So that book was really a compassion project. I wanted people to see that, okay, you feel this way and you should. You have a very justified reason for feeling the way that you feel. And it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because there's something about our world today that we don't fit in. And so a person now can say, okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I can stop beating myself up for this. And when we have that, we spoke a little bit earlier, and I said that just having that self-compassion for ourselves helps us regulate our nervous system so that we can start to take some kind of action and have more honest conversations with ourselves about how we're feeling and what we can do about it. So,
The one thing for me is, at this point in my life, I'm becoming a little bit of a rebel
yeah,
because
good.
you're taught to be, whether you go to school, whether you go to church, whether no matter what, to be consistent with the things that other people want you to do, not the things that you really want in your life. And that's the thing
Yes,
that I'm trying to get people to understand is that you can live the life that you want to live. It's just that you have to be comfortable with moving forward and not just doing what everybody else wants you to do. So
yes.
I commend you for understanding that and really kind of helping people move forward.
Yeah, I thought it was important to name it. Um, so the And if I could add one more thing, the other
Sure.
thing I like about the rebellion and the rebellion against systems is it's no longer personal. So I'm not rebelling against my parents. I'm not rebelling against the bullies that bullied me in school. I'm rebelling against the system that created it. And
Exactly.
we're all in that. So the people who traumatize us, um, even if they were intentional, if that's what they tried to do, there's an innocence there too. They're part of the same disinheritance.
Well, I mean, so many times we don't even understand that. When you go to school, you start with 6 years old, they're teaching you how to be mediocre, right? And do what other people want to teach you and get up and go to work at 8 o'clock, come home at 5, watch your TV and then go to bed, right? They teach you how to do that. And then if you do step outside and start thinking, right, what do they tell you? Nope, do what's on the paper. Come go to recess, come in at a certain time. So everything is regulated for you. And then when you say I'd like to do something different, you're said no, don't do that. So, it's just one of those things and I think it's changing a little bit now for people,
I
but
think so too.
yeah, through society, through a regular evolution, though, everything is meant to. That's why there's a 1%, right? 1% of the people don't do everything that they're told to do, and they end up doing great things. So I know that people can do great things if they'll just do what they feel is they were intended to do on this earth. And
Well, it's
says
right in your mastermind, right? Purpose.
right, yeah. Well, it says here, Gary, many people grew up being rewarded for compliance, which is kind of what we're talking about, compliance and punished for self-expression. What does healthy rebellion look like for them today?
So let's, I think it's important to make the distinction between, compliance and blind compliance. So I think a lot of times what happens is when we grow up, we just get used to following the rules without anybody asking us what we think, right?
Right.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't follow some rules. If you want to be an engineer or a doctor or anything that requires an advanced degree or a college degree, you got to get good grades. That's the way the system is set up, right? And it's a good test for what you're gonna for the work that you're gonna do. And it's very important with children too, that there's a reason why we're asking you to go to bed. So that's not something that's really negotiable. That's not something you get to not do, right? But it's and a lot of that I think becomes comes from I don't know if it's necessarily generational trauma, but our parents want us to fit a certain mold. Like I didn't really have much of a choice about whether or not I was going to college. And I thought that that was in my best, and I thought that that was in my best interest. I wasn't really allowed to challenge my parents' decisions a lot. So I guess the first thing I would say about that is how do we how do we recognize when the compliance is in place and it goes against what we want to do? How can we teach ourselves to have the conversations with the people that are putting us into those boxes? And a lot of times, I don't know. This is the tricky part, especially with kids. It's like they don't know yet. So we got to train the parents to make sure that they're listening to their kids and that they're supporting their kids in what they want to do, right? And so that we can then as kids are growing up, the parents have better conversations with their kids about the things that either the parents are directly influencing or the mentor or their guardian, and what's happening in the external world where teachers are forcing us to learn things we don't want to learn and things like that.
Yeah, well, a lot of times it's so many things that you learn in school you never use once you get out of
Right.
school.
And also, here's a big one. Also, it's never too late to change your mind or do something different. I've been 10 different things in my life. That's one of the things I'm blessed for, is that I was never afraid to change direction. But just because you went to school to learn something and you're good at it, if you hate it, you don't have to do that anymore.
Mhm.
You get to choose you. So then that's the first step, by the way. I think I dodged your question, maybe. Permission. I have to give myself permission to create the life I want to create.
Right. Well, so many times, we go and, you know, if your parents have told you since you were 7 you were going to be an attorney or you were going to be a doctor, and you get to be 19, and all of a sudden you think, or 20, whenever you're going to college, and you're like, well, I don't want to do that. Your parents and you and everyone's been conditioned to say, but you are going to be a lawyer, you are going to be a doctor. So, and then all of a sudden, after 12 years or whatever it is that you become, and you're like, okay, become a doctor. But so much, you are so right, Gary, that so many times people get to that point and they're like, I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be an artist. I want to be something that I can create my own self. And then it becomes a big deal with your parents and then your family and all of that stuff. And that's another trauma induced experience, right? When you're trying to when you're trying to move past that.
And something just popped into my head. Um, when I was a kid, we were rewarded for being on time, and to the point, like if my curfew was midnight, it did, and I'm dead serious when I say this. It didn't matter if you were an hour late or you were 1 minute late. You were late, and you know I understand the need for that boundary, but if the the reward was so great that we got to do whatever we wanted to do, if as long as we were home on time. I didn't have to say where I was going, who I was with. I went out the door. They said be home by midnight, and I was home by midnight. Everything was great, and if I didn't cause too much trouble, everything was good. That played into my perfectionism in a huge
Yeah,
way.
I can see.
If
Yeah.
I would have been late to this call, I used to be I would have been a nervous wreck and probably not even done it. I probably just, well, I'm not showing up. Now I stopped and I said, you know what? I could stop and say, you know what? It's not the end of the world if I'm 2 minutes late to this call. People understand. So that I think that that's a good example of what can happen if we're forced to follow those rules so strictly.
Well, and some of that can be things that you learn. And like I used to be not on time, hardly ever, right? When growing up. But now I have to say that if I'm going to an appointment and I'm like you, if I'm going to be 2 minutes late, I start to just panic.
Mhm.
And I may call you and say, look, I'm gonna be 5 minutes late. And when you live in Florida, you're expected to be 5 minutes late. So it's not one of those things that I should feel that, oh my gosh, but it's something that I taught myself. I went from being late all the time to now always being a little bit early.
And then later in life, we find out that it really, I mean, it was about our own well-being, but it was more about my mother being unable to worry about us when we weren't home on time. She'd be in tears. I mean, that was kind of the punishment for being late. Was mom was crying, and
Well, and that's probably an
that's
intergenerational trait
generational.
that she picked up from her family.
Exactly, exactly.
Uh, it said here, rebellion often requires a regulated nervous system. What practices do you teach that help people stay grounded while they're breaking old patterns and choosing themselves?
Self-compassion. It's probably 90 to 100% of the preliminary work that I do with my clients is self-compassion.
Yeah, well, and so many of us, especially, and there's different degrees of childhood trauma, like we discussed, but so many times we don't learn the self compassion because it's expected us to do certain things or be a certain way. And as kids, right, we can't say, "Oh, I want to do this" or "I want to do this." We're taught to obey our parents and keep going. So that self compassion and self love is so important, but so many of us are not familiar even with self love and self compassion because we were just seeking to be people pleasers and things like that when we were growing up.
Yeah. And it's important that we call it self-compassion, not compassion, because when we're taught to have compassion for other people, but we're not taught to have compassion for ourselves. At least I wasn't. Most of the people I know were not taught. You heard it, but you're like, well, what is that, right? And but the funny thing about self-compassion is that it's the most it's not just self-compassion. It's not just a practice of self-compassion, because when we practice self-compassion, we learn compassion for others. Because if we can see the patterns in ourselves, we can see them in other people. And that's the beauty of looking at trauma through the lens of everybody experiencing it on some part of the spectrum. Like you said, some people have had, I don't work with people who have had severe trauma. I work mostly with people that, well, solely with people with developmental and generational trauma. But everybody fits on that spectrum somewhere. And it's amazing how my own work in self-compassion has allowed me to have relationship with my father that a while ago I never could have imagined. He's it's the single biggest testimony I can give to the power of seeing your own patterns first, and understanding yourself first. And like I said, because if I'm experiencing it, and that's the truth, right? It's true if it's true for everybody. And that
Well, what they say is that I can't be more compassionate for you than I can be compassionate for myself, or I
that's
can't love you or love anyone more than I love myself. And so many times we just go through and we say, "Oh, I'm gonna love my wife, or I'm gonna love my children." But if you don't love yourself, you can't love them more than you love, any more than you love yourself. So it becomes one of those generational things that all of a sudden now they're growing up to be like, I know that I'm going to love myself more than what I got to love myself as a kid, because, but then you get to the point when you grow up and you're the same as your fathers and their fathers and their fathers. So this intergenerational thing that you're in with the trauma, I think you are right. Every single person has a little bit of it, and if we want to grow up to be the person that we were designed to be or that we want to be, we have to be aware of the patterns that we were taught, and that's keeping us from being the person really that we want to be.
and if we're taught to have compassion for others and not ourselves, that compassion for others often gets expressed in either people pleasing, lack of boundaries, or resentment for those people. Because, like you said, you truly can have compassion for them if you don't have it for yourself. And and it's it creates this thought that everybody is more important than I am because I'm supposed to have compassion for them, but not for myself. It's like, you know, we want the best for humanity and we want to do great for humanity, but the problem is that we often forget that we are part of humanity. I am part of humanity as well.
Well, I think that really the hardest pattern, one of the hardest patterns I think to overcome is people pleasing when you're coming
Mhm.
out of
It's a
childhood
huge
trauma,
one.
because that's what you experienced in your childhood. How do I get to be safe? And a lot of times it is being a people pleaser to your parents and to and their friends and the people who you've really been around. So that's a really tough thing, and we've talked
Very
about that
tough.
quite a bit in during the summit. But it, and I'll ask you the same thing: is the self love that we're going through, the self compassion that you're talking about. Once you get to be, a people pleaser and you start setting boundaries, and now you have a good friend that says, "Well, Gary, I don't want to be your friend anymore unless you're still going to do all these things that I ask you to do and be a people pleaser." How do you help your clients, Gary, and even yourself? I guess sometimes is that to set the boundaries and keep the boundaries. And if you lose a friend, then that's part of growth, and really you're kind of growing in to be the person you want to be, rather than just keep people pleasing and remain at that level.
Well, I'll tell you, I lost a lot of people like that. I'm an alcoholic and I've been sober for 19 years now. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And I went through that where, you know, and I didn't understand how, I actually wish it would have been nice if I did understand how their trauma was showing up, and what they were really fearful of was losing the relationship with me. And, but the people who said, "Oh, why can't you have just one?" oh, but you're so much fun when you're drunk. And then I'd say, yeah, until I'm not fun anymore. And then, or, or, or they would take it personal. I had the conversations with them and I said, listen, that's just not who I want to be anymore. And more than once I had to say, it's not how it's going to go. I'm more than happy to hang out with you. But the truth is, if the relationship hinged on alcohol, that's not a friendship. That's two people enabling one another. And and eventually they fall away. And you've kind of got to be okay with it. Some of them were childhood friends. And but the thing about that is that when we stop that behavior and we learn to have those conversations and we get right with ourselves that this is not just what's best for me, but it's also what's going to allow me to bring my gift out into the world is if I create these boundaries and I stay on this path. Not only it does close that relationship, but it opens up opportunities for other relationships that are more in alignment with who we've chosen to be.
Well, and
So
your
it
friends that
shuts
are
one door, but it opens up multiple other ones.
right. Well, I think the one thing we have to remember is that we all drink, right? I mean, I drank for many, many years and did all kinds
Yep.
of things, but it's that we do that to mask ourselves or to for things that we tried not to be to take over our life. So
Yeah.
if our friends are still drinking, they just haven't dealt with their concern yet, where you have actually dealt with your concern. And if you hang around people that don't deal with their concerns, then all of a sudden you're going to think, oh, well, you're right. One more drink here and one more drink here. And now all of a sudden you're back to where you were rather than progressing into being the person that you want to become.
I'll bring this up. I have a program coming out on Thursday called Soul Recovery, and it's dealing with a lot of what we just talked about, and it's dealing with the emotions that come up after people give up. It's kind of written in the or kind of done in the context of alcohol recovery, but it's I did some research and the patterns follow the same no matter what the coping mechanism is that we're giving up. It's the single biggest reason that people in addiction stay addicted, unless it's a physical addiction. But um, that's more complicated and out of my realm of practice. But when you quit something, I always thought once they quit drinking, everything would be great. It wasn't great. It was harder,
Right.
and it's so easy to slip back into that drinking because if you don't understand what's happening, you'd be like, this sucks. If you can't have someone show you that this is just part of your process, dude, you just gotta work through it. And on the other side of it, you'll see. But that's not what happens most of the time. We come back to what we're comfortable with. And let's not forget that our body and we love repetition. We love the familiar and the comfortable, even if it's going to kill us.
Yeah, I mean that sometimes that self gratification, and like you said, people who smoke
Hmm.
know that they're probably going to die sooner than if they didn't smoke. But because they get that dopamine right then, they continue to smoke. Me, I just continue to eat sugar, and I know I'm trying to get rid of that, but I just that's my weakness right now.
Yeah.
Gary, when it says, how can someone tell the difference between rebellion that comes from old survival strategies and rebellion that comes from conscious, empowered choice?
That comes back to the pause again, Viktor Frankl's pause. If it's reactionary, um, it's most likely a rebellion that's from a trauma pattern or a response. If it's created and it's conscious, well, if it's sorry, If it's the opposite, it's created and conscious. We know we're involved in it. We understand why we're involved in it, and we understand that it, it's not out of anger. It's out of love for ourselves. So a good way, I think, to maybe think about that is what's the motivation? If the motivation is dominance, control, performance, wanting to be seen as somebody who cares versus somebody who actually cares, that's a rebellion that's ego driven. If it's done, if it's done because you want to connect with yourself, if it's done because you want a better relationship with an honest relationship, connection with another person, or you want to bring your gifts into the world, or any of those things that fall on, the kind of the purpose side of things, then you know that it's a pretty safe bet that it's a rebellion rooted in love and connection and saying yes to yourself.
Well, and all of those things that you just discussed are just so important
Yeah.
because unless you and again, repetition is the mother of learning. But until you really love yourself, your life is not going to go to the place really that you want it to go. And so many times people want to get here, but they stay here, and it's really a direct response. I guess respect from yourself that you just can't. You don't even think you deserve that, so you just never get there.
And we were talking a lot about self-compassion, and I think it's important to note that, being human beings and being all complex and things like that, it's also, I think, a big piece that people don't understand is that when, you know, you like to think that love is a constant, right? That you get to that point where everything's just all rainbows and unicorns and everything's just all love, right? In my experience, it doesn't work that way. And, but love can also exist outside as not of a feeling, but as a commitment or a declaration to ourselves that I love myself. And when we live with that commitment, it might not always be true that we're feeling in love, but it can also, I think, be okay with ourselves when we're not feeling it. Because if we don't do that, then we start this again. The the internal conversation takes over and we start judging ourselves and calling ourselves phonies because we're out here talking this spiel, right, about love and peace. And well, we're just not wired that way. We haven't evolved there yet.
Well,
But so when we get angry with ourselves or when we have these so-called emotions, I like to think that there are no such things as negative emotions. They're just messengers. They're a sign that something's up, and it's okay to just live in that. We don't have to analyze it. We don't have to overthink it. Sometimes it's just about giving ourselves the space to get on the other side of it, and without having to do something about it. Let it do its thing. Let it deliver its message, whether you consciously receive it or not. It's working something out. That's the way I look at it.
yeah, well,
And
well, what I always say is, if God will give you something to grow in, and
yeah,
then if you don't tend to grow in it, He'll just give you another chance, and He'll give you another chance, and He'll give you another chance until you learn that, and but He's whether you believe in God or the universe, you're growing to be the person that you were created to be. And you can't get there unless you over, sometimes it's like, I need patience. God will not just give you patience, He'll give you opportunities to be patient.
Yeah, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you, in that and with what you just said, do you think it's up to the individual though to take responsibility for that, to allow that to happen? Or is that divine as well?
Well, I think I get a thought
Okay.
on something, the way I look at it is that thought came from the divine. I can either take it or not take it because I do have a free will.
Okay.
But it does come back to the fact that if all of a sudden and if it goes away and it never comes back again, well then maybe that wasn't the direct calling for you. But if all of a sudden you think about that again, it's something that you really need, I think, to take note of and see if that's something that you that you want to do and that you feel like that's where you're growing. Do you agree with that? Or does that answer what we're trying to say?
It's a good perspective. It's a tough question, I think. It's one I wrestle with a little bit. This whole free will thing, to be honest with you, sometimes it feels like I do, and sometimes it feels like I don't have any at all. So I was just just curious to see what your thoughts were on that. But yeah, that's a good way to look at it. It's a helpful way to look at it.
And it's the habits, right? Our habits can become so strong that we're like, oh my gosh, that's too much. Maybe I just don't want to do it. But yeah, sometimes I think the habits are just so strong that you have a hard time moving forward. And here it says, Gary Prep says, for those afraid of disappointing others or breaking family expectations what's a gentle first step towards reclaiming their autonomy? I think we've talked about that a little bit, but go a little bit more in depth on
Boy, um, I think permission to do it. Um, it's probably different for everybody, but that's a good first step. Okay. Um, the awareness is another one. I think we have to open ourselves up to the resources that are available so that we can. Not everybody has been exposed to this kind of thinking, right? Not everybody realizes that there is an option. And that's the beauty of this work is that we get to reach out and say, oh, no, you got to look over here. Look in this direction. You don't have to be like this. But not everybody's open to that. And not everybody wants it. There's people that just want to live like that. And that's fine too. If you're cool and you can say that you're happy, that's fine. But I think we owe it to people to show them that there is another path if they choose it. And again, the self-compassion piece. I honestly, I don't think that there's any science that backs this up. Um, but for me anyway, it's at least an entry point into almost everything is that concept of self-compassion and understanding your situation, understanding the influences, whether you see them or not, or are even aware of them that are acting on you. There's a risk to that. Not everybody wants to hear that that they've had trauma or that the actions of the people that they've wanted that were in charge of taking care of them weren't always in their best interest. They want to believe that it was all true love and this is just the way it is because I'm a product of that love.
it. Well,
It's
one,
and I
go ahead.
struggle with that sometimes, to be completely honest with you. because you can't unsee it once you see it. And if you see it and you don't like it, now you've exacerbated the problem.
Well, the one consistent, I guess, theme that we have in this summit from people that I talk to like yourself is that they changed when they found the person that wouldn't give up on them, that they felt had
Yeah,
compassion for them.
yeah,
And if you just think about it, right? If you were growing up and you never really felt a compassion, and your subconscious mind goes to the work and it says, "Well, this is where we feel safe, so we don't really have to feel that." But and you can't really change your thoughts sometimes until you experience it, right? Then once you experience that self love and that self compassion and become the person that you want to be, all of a sudden now I think that you have your eyes open to a new way of thinking.
yeah. And um, just real quick, I also think that, it's helping people see that nothing, this is tough too, helping people see that nothing was ever personal. And that's hard because, well, I'm the one that experienced the pain. I'm the one that went through it. But the what I mean by that is that everybody that um, caused your trauma was experiencing the trauma, their own trauma. That makes it a little less personal, and it makes forgiveness that much easier. Real forgiveness.
And it kind of goes back to the intergenerational thing, right? If
Hmm.
it could have been love to your parents, what they were giving you could have been love to them. It just didn't turn out to be love for you. And so you wanted to grow a little bit different, but it wasn't. And I agree with you 100%, Gary, that it's not that they didn't want to give you love. They were giving you love that was love to them because
Yes,
that's what their parents gave them.
that's a better answer than the one I gave.
Yeah. I listened to a lot of experts so during the
Thank
last
you.
few days. Um, I just have one last question here, and then it says, "What are the most common rules or myths people must break to finally live from their authentic self instead of old survival patterns?"
I think one of them is understanding what healing is. Um, healing is not being okay all the time. Like I alluded to that earlier, and that healing is a lifelong process. I think way too many people, well, and because this is a part of the toxic culture, we're sold quick fixes. And I really wish I hadn't brought that up because when I get on that subject, but there are no quick fixes. It just doesn't work. You can have all the insights and the aha moments you want. But if your body is not regulated enough to take that and embody it without living in the fantasy land of somebody having a magic wand that they can just wave over you, that's not healing.
Right.
Um, I think the other thing is stop feeling like your needs are a burden. That's another one. If I need, and that's a big one of mine. If my needs are a burden, if I feel like my needs and what I want are a burden on somebody else, I don't know how, that's a tough one to overcome. You're not a burden, and it's especially important when we're doing purpose-driven work that we realize that we're not a burden because we're going to need help. If you want to do anything in this world that makes a big difference, you're going to need help. And that's going to require asking favors. It's going to require asking people to speak at your summit, right?
Well, the one thing that I'm a big Zig Ziglar fan, actually, I'm a Zig Ziglar coach, is that, one of his favorite famous sayings was, "You don't climb the high mountains by yourself. It is working with other people." And as long as you stand alone, you'll never reach the point where you're trying to go. It's through recognition of being with other people and and growing to be the person that you want to be.
You know, in one more, I don't know how we're doing for time here, but also this relationship that we have with rest, where we think we have to earn it. We have to earn the right to rest. No, you need rest because you're a human being, and it's okay to not be busy all the time. That's hard for people
Yeah.
because rest means you're not busy, right? And you're not occupied doing something else. And now you got to be alone with yourself. And
Well,
so that's a tough one, but that's a big one that you don't. And you know, we're taught that from the time that we're kids. You know, oh my goodness, you know how often I was praised for being such a good worker. I mean, it's important to work hard, right?
yeah.
But I was always busy when I was a kid, and I thought that that's what I thought that's what it was all about. Busy, 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 always working.
Well, and we do live in that world, right?
Yes, we
I
do.
mean, people judge you if you're not busy, right?
Yep.
Or you go on, you get you doing well, and you say, "I'm going to take another week off." This is your third vacation this year, and people will start judging you, right? So you have to, again, it all kind of goes back to self love, right? You love yourself enough to.
A lot of us they wear their burnout as a badge of honor.
Yeah, you're right, and it's so prevalent. Well, Gary, I think that your concentration on self love and your concentration on helping people move forward. If someone wants to get a hold of you to get some coaching, how would they do that? We'll put it on the screen here once you say it.
Probably the best way right now is www.secondascent.com or Gary@secondascent.com.
Okay, great. Well, Gary, I do thank you so much. And again, the one thing that I know is that every time I interview a coach and a speaker, I just learn so much. And thank you for
Good.
expanding my knowledge and every time it helps me grow myself. So thank you very much. And I hope when some people get a hold of you, they're going to say, I'm glad I got a hold of him. And now I'm moving forward as well. But thank you so much for being a part of the summit. And I'm sure that we're going to be together again talking and doing another summit.
Well, I hope so. Thank you. I learned a lot too, and hope you think of me in the future.
I sure will. Thank you so
All
much
right.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you.